What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about an X-Men book that I bought today. I went to Books A Million, my local Books A Million, and they had a whole bunch of books in their bargain section that wasn't there the last time I looked, and one of them was Cyclops, Volume 1, Starstruck, written by Greg Rucka, with art by Russell Dauterman and Carmen Carnero. This is the first 5 issues of the most recent Cyclops solo series. I think the series started in 2004. It lasted, I think, 11 issues, and so this is Volume 1 of that series. And I have never made much of a secret about the fact that I don't especially care for Cyclops. He's not a character that I have ever really liked. I think there was exactly one moment in the first 30 years of that character's existence that I actually liked him. I was never a huge fan of him. But what I like about this series is that young Cyclops is talking about how much old Cyclops actually sucks. Multiple times in this book, he says that he has seen what his future has in store for him and he does not like it. He does not want that future for himself. And he's actively trying to change his future and become a better person than what he's seen himself become. I really like that idea. I also really like the idea of young Cyclops getting to meet and be with his father, because in the main Marvel timeline, the timeline where the teenage X-Men were not pulled into the future, like they were in Bendis' all-new X-Men, Cyclops didn't even get to know that his father was still alive until he was already an adult. It was like sometime, I think shortly before the Dark Phoenix saga, that he found out that Corsair of the Starjammers was actually his father. It was right around the time when Jean Grey got her powers as the Phoenix that the audience found out that Corsair was Cyclops' father, but it was several years later when Scott found out. But what I like about this is that we get to see young Cyclops bonding with Corsair, and this is a very new experience for both of them, because Cyclops grew up as an orphan ever since he was a young boy, and Corsair has spent most of his life shirking his responsibilities as a father. And not only does young Cyclops talk about how much old Cyclops sucks, but he also calls out Corsair and says, hey, listen, because of you, it's very likely that you're kind of the reason why old Cyclops turned out the way that he did. He says, you were our dad. We, of course, needed you in our lives. But the other Cyclops, it's very likely that he needed you even more than I do right now. And it's very good to see Corsair get called out for something like this, because there was one time, there was an issue, it was right before Grant Morrison started writing New X-Men, where Cyclops and Corsair kind of were on a camping trip out on some alien world, and basically it came down to Corsair saying that when he had the opportunity to go back to Earth, he didn't want to, just because he had been out in space so long and he felt like his life on Earth was no longer his life. He felt like he didn't have a place on Earth. Even though he knew that he had 2 sons who were alive on Earth, he was very purposely shirking his responsibilities as a father, as I've already said. So it's good to see these characters confronting these ugly truths about themselves. I don't think that I need to actually spell this out, but I really liked this book. I'm not usually a Cyclops fan, and I was not a fan of Brian Michael Bendis' X-Men work, what I read of it. I read 4 volumes in total. I was not a fan of the idea of bringing the teenage original X-Men to the present day. I didn't like that idea, but I do like the idea of Cyclops, young Cyclops, actually getting to bond with his father and trying to fight his future. I like all of that. I like the idea of these 2 characters getting to spend some time together. We get to see a lot of really cool and interesting stuff with the alien worlds and these alien characters. We find out how Corsair is still alive, because Corsair died in, I want to say it was Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire from 2006, 2007, something like that. And Corsair died at the end of that story, and we find out how he is resurrected. And it's an explanation I'm not sure I buy too much, because we find out that his girlfriend Hepzibah is actually the reason why he is still alive. The reason I don't buy that is because after the Rise and Fall of the Shi'ar Empire storyline, Hepzibah stayed on Earth and she started having sex with Warpath. And basically she tells Warpath that she has told Cyclops that she's now moved on, she's no longer pining after dead Corsair, and she's now going to be sleeping with Warpath. And that's a relationship we never actually got to see explored very much, because Hepzibah was part of Ed Brubaker's Uncanny X-Men run for 2 volumes after the Rise and Fall storyline, and then we got Messiah Complex, and then Ed Brubaker kind of gently came off of the X-Men books around that time, and then Hepzibah was no longer being used in the X-Men books, and then next thing we know, Corsair is back to being alive, and we find out that apparently Hepzibah just could not stand the thought of losing Corsair. Like I said, I don't buy that, since she told Cyclops that she was moving on and that she was going to be with Warpath. But that's a very minor nitpick. It's really only something that you will notice if you've been reading reading X-Men comics for the last 10 years. If this is your first X-Men comic, or maybe you just started reading X-Men comics starting with Avengers vs. X-Men, this probably won't bother you that much. Truthfully, I don't mind a little bit of a contrived reason for why Corsair is still alive if it means that we get to have these characters bonding with each other and getting to know each other through a contrivance of him being alive. So overall, I really like this book. It's short, it's only 5 issues long. I got it bargain price, like I said, but I would recommend that you buy it if you find it somewhere. Even if you are not a huge Cyclops fan, I would still recommend that you give this a chance, because this is a Cyclops I could get behind. And if this series had kept going, if we had 5 volumes of young Cyclops out in the middle of space just hanging out with his dad, I would be very interested in reading those stories. So those are my thoughts on Cyclops Volume 1, Starstruck. I hope that you guys liked this video. I hope I was able to convince you to go check this book out if you see it somewhere. In the meantime, I will see you guys later in the week with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will catch you later. Have a good one.